The weight of loss sat heavily on my shoulders, but there was no room for solace, not with the chaos Evelyn brought to my brother's funeral. My name is Grace Thompson, a 35-year-old financial advisor, and my life has always revolved around my family and integrity. My brother, Owen, was more than family. He was my mentor, my closest friend, and the person who guided me after the tragic accident that took our parents. He had built a $50 million company from the ground up, dedicating his life to its success and, in many ways, to me. But today, in the heart of Dallas, Texas, any peace I hoped to find was shattered. Evelyn, Owen's widow, stormed into the service demanding that I transfer the company to her immediately. Her voice, loud and entitled, filled the solemn church, and eyes turned, some in shock, others in anger. "Grace, if you don't hand over Owen's company to me, I won't let you start the proceedings," she threatened, her face twisted with anger. The lawyer stood by, calm yet resolute. "Evelyn, you should know that Owen left all his assets to his sister. You don't have any claim to them." Evelyn's face drained of color, then turned red with rage. Before I could react, she slapped me hard across the face and stormed out, leaving a hush over the room. My heart pounded with a mix of hurt and fury. She had no shame, no boundaries, but this was only the beginning. The next day, as I sorted through Owen's belongings and paperwork, a call came in from Evelyn. Her tone was different this time, panicked and desperate. I almost didn't pick up, but my curiosity got the best of me. "Grace, I need help," she stammered, the bold defiance from yesterday absent. I took a deep breath, torn between anger and the remnants of family ties, but decided to listen. I held the phone tightly, Evelyn's shaky voice filling my ear. She was in distress, begging me to help her with a situation she refused to explain in detail. Part of me wanted to ignore her cries for help, but my brother had loved this woman once, even if she hadn't deserved it. "Evelyn, I don't understand what you want from me," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "After everything yesterday, you expect me to help you?" There was silence on the other end before she whispered, "It's about Owen's business." My heart skipped a beat. Could she have uncovered some hidden aspect of his company, or worse, tried something illegal to claim it? She continued, desperation creeping into her words. "Owen left everything to you, and I'm in financial trouble, Grace. I have debts I can't cover. You're the only one who can help me get out of this mess." I sighed, knowing this was less about Owen's memory and more about Evelyn's greed. "Look, Evelyn, I can't solve your problems, and frankly, I don't owe you anything. Owen's company was his legacy, and he entrusted it to me for a reason." I felt a strange calm settle over me, a resolve to protect what he'd left behind. A few days later, the first sign of Evelyn's retaliation came. She filed a claim against the inheritance, attempting to halt the transfer of Owen's assets. I had no choice but to prepare for a legal battle. I reached out to an attorney, determined to protect my brother's legacy and prevent Evelyn from getting her hands on the business. Meanwhile, my family was adjusting to life without Owen, though his absence left a void none of us could ignore. Lucas, my 18-year-old son, had always looked up to his uncle, and Mia, my 14-year-old daughter, struggled to understand why someone would try to exploit our grief. "Mom, why is Aunt Evelyn doing this?" Mia asked one evening while we were setting the table for dinner. "It's hard to explain, sweetheart," I replied, keeping my frustration in check. Sometimes people let greed take over, and they forget what really matters. As we settled down for dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that Evelyn's schemes were far from over. She wasn't going to give up easily, and I knew I had to be vigilant. The days dragged on, each one filled with more demands from Evelyn's lawyers and mounting tension. Finally, I decided it was time to learn more about what I was truly up against. I hired a private investigator, hoping to uncover any secrets Evelyn might be hiding. The investigator's findings arrived a week later, delivered in a thick envelope. As I opened it, I felt a surge of anticipation mixed with dread. Inside were detailed reports and photographs, revealing a side of Evelyn I'd only suspected but hadn't fully known. The investigator's report outlined Evelyn's involvement in various dubious schemes, money laundering, fraudulent investments, and the misuse of Owen's name to front illegal business ventures. She had been funneling funds through a series of shell companies, covering her tracks by attaching Owen's name to everything. It was clear she'd intended to use his reputation to shield her activities, and now, with his passing, she was desperate to salvage what she could. The betrayal stung, but more than that, it steeled my resolve. Evelyn wasn't just greedy, she was dangerous. I couldn't let her continue tarnishing Owen's memory or endanger my family. Armed with this information, I met with my lawyer. "This gives us a strong case, but we need to proceed carefully," he advised, his face serious. "If Evelyn finds out we're investigating her, she might escalate her actions." As we prepared our next legal steps, Evelyn's behavior became more erratic. She showed up at my doorstep unannounced one evening, her eyes wild with fury. I hesitated before opening the door, but her loud pounding had already drawn the attention of my neighbors. "Grace, I know you're in there. Let me in," she yelled, her voice echoing down the quiet street. "Evelyn, you need to leave," I called through the door, keeping it firmly shut. "I'm not discussing anything with you unless it's through our lawyers." She sneered, her tone turning venomous. "Do you think hiding behind your lawyers will protect you? I'll find a way to get what's mine. This isn't over." She turned and walked away, but the threat lingered in the air. Inside, I felt a mixture of anger and fear. Evelyn was growing increasingly desperate, and I knew I had to protect my family. Later that evening, I discussed it with my husband, Mark. "We should consider a restraining order," Mark said, his face etched with concern. "Evelyn is unpredictable, and I don't want her coming near you or the kids." The next day, we filed for the restraining order, hoping it would be enough to keep Evelyn at a distance. But deep down, I knew she wouldn't stop easily. The restraining order was granted swiftly, a small victory amidst the storm Evelyn had brought upon us. She was ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from my family and me, but even with this legal barrier in place, I couldn't shake the unease that lingered. Evelyn wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. Just as I had feared, she retaliated almost immediately. Her lawyers filed a countersuit against me, challenging Owen's will and claiming she had been wrongfully excluded from his assets. The case escalated, and soon we were facing off in court. The courtroom was filled with tension as Evelyn presented her case, her demeanor alternating between anger and feigned sorrow. She portrayed herself as the grieving widow, claiming that I had manipulated Owen in his final days, convincing him to sign over everything to me. Her accusations were vile, attempting to paint me as a schemer who had preyed on her husband's supposed vulnerabilities. I took a deep breath as it was my turn to speak, feeling the weight of Owen's legacy on my shoulders. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steady but firm, "Owen entrusted his company to me not out of manipulation or deceit, but because he knew the truth about Evelyn's actions. I have evidence that she was involved in illegal activities, using his name to cover her crimes." A hush fell over the courtroom as I presented the documents from the investigator, detailing Evelyn's financial misconduct and illegal dealings. Her face paled as she realized the severity of the evidence, but she quickly regained her composure, shooting me a glare filled with fury. "You're lying," she shouted, her voice ringing out in the silent room. "Owen would never have done this to me." The judge called for order, his face stern as he examined the documents. He looked at Evelyn, his gaze unyielding. "Miss Evelyn, the evidence presented here is substantial. We will review these findings in detail, but if these allegations are proven true, there will be serious consequences." Evelyn's defiant posture faltered, her confidence beginning to crack. Her lawyers whispered urgently to her, but I could see that she was unraveling. For the first time, she realized she was losing control of the situation. After a tense recess, the judge returned to deliver his verdict. He looked directly at Evelyn, his tone final. "Miss Evelyn, based on the evidence and the last will and testament of Owen Thompson, I find no grounds for your claims. Furthermore, the allegations against you are serious and will be forwarded for further investigation. The restraining order will remain in place, and you are prohibited from contacting or approaching Ms. Grace Thompson and her family." A wave of relief washed over me, but I kept my emotions in check, unwilling to show any triumph in front of Evelyn. She stood there, seething, her face a mask of rage and humiliation. As I left the courtroom, I felt the burden of Owen's legacy lift, knowing I had protected it from her clutches. The courtroom victory brought relief, but it was short-lived. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn's desperation turned sinister. She was no longer trying to win legally. Now, it seemed her only goal was revenge. I began receiving anonymous calls late at night, silent except for the faint sound of breathing on the other end. Strange cars appeared outside my house, staying parked just long enough to leave me feeling uneasy. Mark and I became hyper-vigilant, especially around Lucas and Mia. We updated our home security, warned the kids to stay cautious, and tried to keep up a semblance of normalcy. But Evelyn's threats hung over us, a shadow darkening every corner of our lives. One evening, while I was cooking dinner, Mia ran into the kitchen, her face pale. "Mom, there's someone outside watching us," she whispered, clutching the edge of the counter. I looked through the window, and sure enough, there was a figure standing just beyond the fence. My heart raced as I immediately called Mark, who was on his way home from work. "I'll be there in 5 minutes," he said, his voice tense. "Lock all the doors and keep the kids inside." By the time he arrived, the figure had disappeared, but it was clear Evelyn's threats were escalating. This wasn't just about money anymore. She was fixated on making our lives a living nightmare. Mark and I sat down that night, determined to put an end to her harassment. "We have to take this to the police," I said, my voice resolute. "Evelyn's gone too far, and I won't let her intimidate us any longer." The police took our statement seriously, and with the restraining order already in place, they agreed to increase patrols around our neighborhood. However, they warned us that without clear evidence linking Evelyn to the harassment, there was only so much they could do. Days later, the investigator I had hired called with new information. "Grace, I've uncovered more about Evelyn's recent activities. She's been associating with some unsavory individuals, and it looks like she's hired someone to keep an eye on you." The realization made my skin crawl. Evelyn wasn't just lurking in the shadows. She was actively stalking us, invading every aspect of our lives. That evening, we gathered as a family in the living room, feeling the weight of the situation. Lucas spoke up, his voice steady but troubled. "Mom, I know you want to protect us, but I think we need to go on the offensive. Uncle Owen wouldn't have let her do this to us." His words resonated with me. I couldn't keep waiting for Evelyn's next move. I had to take control of the situation. With the investigators' help, I began compiling every piece of evidence we had on Evelyn's harassment, her illegal dealings, and her attempts to sabotage Owen's company. With every bit of evidence in hand, I felt more determined than ever to stop Evelyn once and for all. My investigator helped me file a comprehensive report with the police, detailing her harassment, connections to criminal associates, and misuse of Owen's company for money laundering. It wasn't just about self-defense now, it was about ending her reign of manipulation and deceit. A few days later, a detective contacted me to review the evidence in detail. They assured me that with the restraining order already violated multiple times, along with her illegal activities and stalking, they could move forward with an official investigation and possibly an arrest. As the police delved into Evelyn's past, more disturbing truths came to light. She had been involved in several fraudulent schemes before marrying Owen, using his reputation as a cover. Her shady network was now under scrutiny, and it became clear that she was involved in a web of criminal activities that extended far beyond her vendetta against me. Evelyn, sensing the walls closing in, made one last, desperate attempt to intimidate me. Late one night, she showed up at my front door, pounding furiously, shouting threats through the door. "You can't hide behind lawyers and the police, Grace. This isn't over," she screamed, her voice echoing in the quiet neighborhood. My hands shook as I dialed the police, keeping my voice calm for Lucas and Mia's sake. Mark stood protectively beside me, his eyes blazing with anger. Minutes later, police cars pulled up, and officers approached her with caution. Evelyn resisted, her words slurring as she cursed me and the officers alike. They managed to restrain her and took her into custody, charging her with harassment, stalking, and violation of the restraining order. I watched from the doorway, a mix of relief and sorrow washing over me. Evelyn's arrest made the news, and her criminal activities soon became public knowledge. The police uncovered her involvement in fraud, money laundering, and even attempts to siphon money from Owen's business. Her web of deception had finally unraveled, and she faced multiple charges that would likely keep her in prison for years. With Evelyn out of our lives, my family began to heal. I returned to my work as a financial advisor, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Owen's company was thriving, his legacy preserved, and my children could finally find peace after months of fear and uncertainty. One evening, as we sat together for dinner, Lucas looked at me and smiled. "Mom, Uncle Owen would be proud of you. You protected his legacy and us. You didn't let Evelyn win." His words filled me with a deep sense of gratitude. We had been through so much, but together we had faced it all, honoring Owen's memory by standing strong and protecting our family. Evelyn's darkness had finally lifted, and the future felt bright again. As the weeks turned into months, I knew that while life would never be the same, we had emerged stronger, bound by the resilience that Owen had always inspired in us. And with every new day, his memory lived on, not in the shadows of conflict, but in the love and unity of the family he had cherished.